President Obama recently commented that it bothers him that people pay so much attention to terrorism and so much less attention to issues like climate change, the spread of disease, and things like that. And he thinks the reason for that is the ratings-obsessed media. Now, Fox News is one outlet of that ratings-obsessed media, and they were shocked at this accusation. Here's Andrea Tantaros.
The president, according to his spokesman, believes drastic changes to the environment pose a bigger threat in the daily lives of Americans than terrorism. And those remarks coming the same day we learned of the death of Kayla Mueller, the fourth American to die in the hands of ISIS since last summer. Harris, how many Americans have died from climate change? This is the thing. You said the timing was off. The science is off. And let me point to a very recent example. That's the most important thing. The science is off. We just had a snowstorm 2 weeks ago in New York. They told us New York City was going to get blown out. We had to give up our freedom and sit in our house, no cars on the road. Well, guess what? The models were wrong. So they got the models wrong on the science 24 hours before. How about those models 10, 20 years from now?
That was hilarious.
Yeah, that is...
Fox News talking about how the science is off.
Yeah.
While in the middle of being horribly wrong about the science. Mm-hmm. I believe that a weather report predicting the weather is a little different than our look at climate change and what has already occurred.
I think they should name those fields different things. That would get rid of some of the confusion, actually.
We all have a lot to say about this, but let me start with a couple of things I love. One, when Andrea Tantaros says the science is wrong, I don't know if you caught this, but Kennedy pointed at her like, you go, girl. You're on. You nailed it. That's right. So I like that she had a buddy. And then, I spent 8 years in local news. In local news. And weather reporting's gotten pretty good, but it's not perfect. We don't know exactly where storms are going to go. And poor Andrea Tantaros had to give up her freedom, had to stay home in her incredibly nice apartment for a whole day, watching movies, drinking hot chocolate. That must have been awful.
Yeah.
Gave up their freedom. Gave up your freedom. Boston, which is just about 200 miles from New York, and in the path of a giant storm, that's nothing. That's like a 2 or 3 degree shift in the storm. Boston has had 78 inches of snow. 78 inches of snow.
The science is off.
The science is off. No, the science is actually dead right. They didn't know it was going to hit New York or if it would go a little further north. It went a little further north. The storm was real. The snowfall was real. It just didn't hit where you live. And she is so unbelievably myopic that if she can't look out her window and see someone dead of climate change, then it isn't true.
Yeah. Now, there are multiple things that bother me about that. One is how heartless you need to be to make the statement that she just made. Because you can, when a government says we're shutting down the city because of a storm, you can be wrong in 2 ways. You can be wrong the way they were, and what's the downside? People had to stay inside and watch Netflix.
Give up their freedom.
But you could be wrong, you lose all your freedom. But you could also lose your life. They could be wrong in the opposite way. They could say, no, feel free, it's not going to be that bad. And then, as happens every single year in New England, dozens at the very least people will die as a result of cold weather. But she doesn't think about that. She doesn't care about that. You mentioned the fact that she's conflating meteorology with climate science, long-term trends over hundreds of thousands of years with some guy in front of a green screen, which is not the same thing. Yeah, and also I love the damned if you do, damned if you don't nature of Fox News' coverage of climate change. If there had been a blizzard, that would prove that global climate change is not happening. There's no global warming if there's a blizzard, but if there's not a blizzard, there's also no global warming. Yeah. So either way, it just works so perfectly if you're Andrea Tantaros.
John, blizzards go in, blizzards go out. You can't explain that.
I can't. But I like the point. You're a regular Kennedy over there. But I like the trend that Fox News is on recently. How many people have died from climate change? Must be 0, right?
Right.
How many people have Christians killed? According to Eric Bolling? 0.
She asked that question as if everyone in the world knows that answer is 0.
Yeah.
How many? Am I right?
Yeah.
It's none.
And she knows it's 0 because she did no research. But unfortunately, I had time this morning, so I did some research. There have been at least two reports in the past couple of years that have attempted to calculate how many people per year die as a result of global warming. We're not even counting the millions who are displaced or have to move to a new region, because they can't do agriculture anymore.
Is this going to count?
Let's just get to the deaths.
Okay, I'll get deaths.
So here's the first study. Climate change will lead to 250,000 extra deaths a year from 2030, according to a study by the WHO, which is sort of a reputable organization. Around 48,000 will die from diarrhea, 60,000 due to malaria, 95,000 from childhood undernutrition, as well as 38,000 elderly people because of heat exposure. However, from The Guardian, we have details from another one. Climate change is already responsible for 300,000 deaths a year and is affecting 300 million people per year. Increasing severe heat waves, floods, storms, and forest fires will be responsible for as many as 500,000 deaths a year by 2030, which is not that far off. Economic losses due to climate change today amount to more than $125 billion a year, and by 2030, according to the report, climate change could cost $600 billion a year. Those reports are on the internet. I have a feeling she has internet access at the studio, if not at her fancy apartment. She should know those before she talks about the difference between terrorism and climate change.
But to Ben's point, she's like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about. No one died of diarrhea in front of Fox News Channel.
Yeah.
So it's totally fine, except of course verbal diarrhea, but that's a difference."
Yeah, it's I mean, what a broadcasting lightweight she is. I mean, it's just staggering that they let these folks on the air disseminating information. And of course, you don't even have to, and she asked about America. Well, first of all, I want to correct one thing you said right at the beginning, because Obama didn't say that Americans worry more about terrorism. He blamed it squarely on the media. He said,
that's what I said, because they're so focused on ratings,
so
that's
the
all
media is leading people in the wrong direction.
Although it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, because if they're worried about ratings, so they cover one thing than another, it implies that that's what people are more interested in.
Yeah, and of course, the right thing is that we shouldn't worry as much about terrorism as other things. And in that same thing, although the deaths of those 4 people are at the hands of ISIS is horrible.
Yeah.
They literally said in the piece, Kayla Mueller, the 4th American, and you know that this summer, the first time that a significant heat wave comes to Chicago, comes to the Midwest, hundreds of people will die. Hundreds of Americans will die, the same number that died last year and maybe more. And we know that those numbers are increasing because we also know that the last, 10 years have been the 10 hottest years on record.
Yeah.
So one final point on this. Brian Williams got suspended for 6 months. These guys do it every single day.
Every day.
You know, oh, nobody died from climate change, that's it. But that's not true. Okay, but you said it. Any repercussions? Isn't that interesting that for Fox News, it's a way of doing business? You don't get punished for that. You get your next contract for that. You get rewarded for that. So what a weird double standard that if anybody in mainstream media is off by a little bit, exaggeration, lie, whatever you want to call it, they got to go. Nobody trusts them anymore.
Yeah.
Fox News goes out there and just one crazy lie after another, and ho-hum, no consequences whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'd like to fire Kennedy just for the point.